Bitcoin has just printed a very rare candlestick pattern. It's called the Bearish Abandoned Baby. In this video, I'm going to show you what it looks like and how we can potentially trade it. So let's dive in. And here it is, the Bearish Abandoned Baby. So this is a candlestick pattern that occurs not many times. It's very, very rare. But when it does, we should be on the lookout for potential follow through. So here you can see this is a dodgy candle. So you have the open, you have a move above, you have a move below, and then you have the close right at the open again. So this candle in itself signifies indecision. However, what we had prior to this candle was very telling. So we had a gap to the upside. I'm going to mark the gap so that you can learn and spot them on your own charts. So you have the high of the previous candle, and then you have the low. So before we see the next candle here, you can already tell that this is an indecision candle, but it's been followed by a gap. On the next day, we then trade below the gap low, okay? But we never fill the gap. So now what we have is a candlestick pattern that it's been left behind. So it's a shift in price action. Therefore, the next few days will be very key, because if in this case, Bitcoin is unable to claim that gap, in other words, 116,640, the price action should gravitate towards the downside. This is very rare to occur, and when it does, we should pay attention. Let me go back and just scan the charts and just show you another one. For example, here, this day here is the Thursday, the 22nd, 2025, May. You can see we have a similar situation where price action gives us the same sort of characteristics. You have the previous candle high, you then have obviously the dodgy candle above, and then on the next day we open, retest the gap, and then we fell for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days, still making lower lows and lower highs. So again, it's a very rare pattern that occurs, and this in Bitcoin is more visible if we turn on the regular trading hours, because as you know, during the spot trading, you don't have the breaks in candles. Therefore, it's going to be very difficult to see these gaps in price action. So in TradingView, how you can go about checking the regular trading hours gaps is by, on your charts, selecting the 24-hour time frame, okay, and then selecting the regular trading hours down here on this settings tool. And then you should be able to see that the candles will be split with gaps if there's a gap between the previous regular trading hours session and today's regular trading hour session. So if now we unselect the regular trading hours and go to the electronic, you can see that Bitcoin is already trading much lower following the gap and the baby, a bearish abandoned baby. So you can already see that just by simply being aware of these patterns, you can start to formulate some nice trade plans. But now is what follows. So let's dive in, and I'm going to obviously remove the baby from here so that it doesn't interfere with our TA. And you can see here, just by simply going to electronic trading hours, you can't quite see the gap. Okay, so let's go back to regular trading hours, and there's the gap. You can see the clear dodgy candle at the very high. You can see the gap to the downside, and this is Friday's trading session. So today, obviously, the regular trading hours session has not started yet. That's going to be in a couple of hours. Then we should have more price action. But for now, let's formulate a plan and be ready for what's to come next. So where BTC is failing here is the 118, and I do have some levels marked here, so let's just bring those levels. So in here I have a balance. So a balance is a range, okay? And how I did this range is from the initial candle high to the initial candle low of the whole range, okay? I've forward this range to current price action. And you can see that since then, we've had a look above and failed, back below the low and failed, because now we have retested the midpoint and again rejecting. The thing here is this pattern being a rare pattern, we kind of have to pay attention. So for the next few days, what I'm going to be looking for is A, does Bitcoin today and tomorrow has the ability to go and trade back inside that gap? So let's mark the gap properly, and the gap will be from the high of Friday. So that's 116,740, and the low of Thursday, which is the actual bearish abandoned baby. Okay, so trading within this gap and acceptance within that gap, it's bullish, and we should expect higher prices. And my eye will go straight to at least the balance range high and beyond. However, failure to do so can bring those lower prices. So currently, the next place, logical place to keep an eye on is going to be the gap low of today. So today being the 22nd, okay, we're going to have potentially a gap that is going to be filled around 115, 210. So again, let's just turn off the regular trading hours only, and let's just see where it is. So you can see that we have this big impulsive move down to the balance range low already during the overnight trading. So it's going to be quite difficult for Bitcoin to go all the way to 115. Therefore, we can pretty much say that there will be another gap, which is again bearish. And the gap guidelines is simple. Go with any gaps that aren't filled fairly quickly. Meaning that, let's say that price is currently at 113. So current price is here. If later we are unable to fill the gap all the way here and instead just kind of like stay within the midpoint and reject, then we're going to have once more another gap, and then we can look for price to continue lower. So going into today's session, what I'm looking for is for a potential retest of the gap low, and that is going to be anywhere between obviously the 115 220 true RTH gap low, or anywhere in that vicinity of 114, just because obviously we have quite a large gap already if the market was to open right now. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And I hope that you can see what I'm looking for just based on this pattern. Okay, very rare. It only occurs once or twice in every 6 months, if so. So we must pay attention to those because it signifies a change in the sentiment as well. So, obviously reclaiming, it's very bullish because then this all liquidation that we've seen overnight, then any short traders down here will get trapped, and then price can then really push through. But while we remain below the gaps, that is going to be a bearish signal, and we have to align with that new sentiment and continue and trade with price action, which is to the downside. So in terms of targets now, so for targets, I will be looking simply to the range low, and that sits around the 108,000. And the reason why I like this level is because we have another RTH gap down here. So I'm going to just enable my gaps, and you can see. So below the swing low that we formed on the Friday, the 29th, we have a gap, and I'm going to zoom in so that you can see this gap here. So this gap sits between the high of Tuesday, the 1st of July, 2025, and the low of Monday, the 7th. So you can see between 107,840 and 107,650, there is a gap in price. So from the high to the low and to this low, there's still an unfinished gap there. And then obviously below that, there's really nothing until you get to 104,900, and 103,500. So these are all the RTH, regular trading hours, gaps, okay, which I'm looking for in terms of like magnets or targets for prices, okay. So these are the inefficiencies that have not been traded to, okay. Above price, obviously we have the gap at 120, so that is something to, you know, just keep on our charts. But for now, while we remain below the initial bearish baby here and today's new gap, which is very likely to be anywhere between this 113 to 15 large gap. So while we remain below these two levels, we have to entertain them shorts and potential trade back below the range low. So let me just quickly enable the anchored VWAP. So we have an anchored VWAP which comes in between those two larger gaps to the downside. So again, another big confluence of price action wanting to revisit potentially this low. What we're going to also do is we're going to plot the 1-to-1 trend fib extension from the high to this low and to the new bearish abandoned baby candle. And we also have confluence around that 103,500, which is the lowest gap filled down here. And if I then pull up the higher time frame moving averages, you can see that currently we are at the 50. That's where we kind of closed on Friday. Overnight, big displacement with a gap down to balance range low at 112. And I'm going to show you this, what it looks like. There you go, down here. And then if we go back to RTH, you can see that the next meaningful support, which is the big 200 simple moving average, comes in all the way down at $102,000, just below the gap filled at 103. So going into today and the next few days, my plan on BTC is quite simple. So let's go through that very quickly. And it's going to be, let me just clean this up so that it looks nice. There you go, perfect. So let's just zoom in. Always nice to zoom in so we can see. So again, just to recap, we have the RTH chart set in 24 hours. With this view, we can then see the true RTH gaps, which we are unable to do so if we just look at spot price, because spot will be trading 24/7. Therefore, by doing this, we can then follow that institutional kind of flow. Okay, so we can see we have the bearish abandoned baby, we have the gap, and then today, potentially, we're going to have a large gap as well. Meaning that if we can open and move up slightly at the RTH open, in other words, look for a candle that looks something like this, open down here where it is now, have a little move up, and then continuation lower. We potentially will have another gap that doesn't have to be filled, but if it's filled and then obviously acceptance still below, it's bearish. Okay, and then we can trade down to the lower prices, which will be at least minimum that nice range low down here at 108 to 107, which happens to be the next gap on the RTH. So again, this is what I'm looking for next on BTC. This is going to be like that short-term plan that can last 1 to 2 weeks, or even slightly less than that. And if the continuation is real and continues, then we can look for much lower prices. That can be those 103s to 102s, which is where the 200 simple moving average on the daily is sitting and waiting. Okay, now the opposite of this would be to opening today with very high strength back through, fill the gap, and then acceptance inside the upper gap. That would then change the context completely, whereby we will be shifting then from this slightly bearish short-term buyers to a higher time frame resume of the trend for the much higher prices, which we're still kind of looking for, you know, those 100 and at least 134 to 138. That is where mainly those higher time frame targets will come in. But for now, while we have this local new references, we can align with this short-term time frames and follow what the market is telling us. So currently, with the bearish abandoned baby, there's typically a 60 to 65% chance that we get some follow through over the next few days. So that's where I'm going to align, and that's what I'm going to be looking for next on BTC. So again, everything we cover here today, it's for educational purposes only, and it's not deemed as financial advice. If you guys want more from us, we're at chartchampions.com. And yeah, don't forget to click the bell and subscribe for more content like this. So yeah, that's my view on BTC. And yeah, take care, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.